Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we make sense of the confusing world of finance and give you the real scoop. Today we're diving into EQT Private Equity Company LLC's latest filing, and let me tell you, it is all about the value. So what does this filing actually tell us? Well, on the 18th of September of 2025, EQT Private Equity, S-Manager EQT Partners Inc., figured out something called the transactional net asset value for the company. Think of this as the price the company uses to buy and sell its own shares. It's like the company's own internal valuation that determines how much its shares are worth at a specific moment. This report specifically shares this value as of the 31st of August 2025, broken down by different share classes. Let S look at the numbers for Class I shares. The transactional net asset value per S share was $26.7. Then we have Class A, I shares at $26.75, and Class A, D shares at $26.74. Scroll Class A, J1 shares scroll. We also see Class A, J1 shares at $26.73. And similarly, Class A, J2 shares were also valued at $26.73. Per S share, these are very close valuations showing consistency across these particular share classes. Scroll Class A S shares scroll. Next up, we have Class A S shares, which came in at $25.72. This is a bit lower than the previously mentioned classes. Moving on, Class E shares were valued at $27.01. Then we have Class Q shares at $27.06, Class H shares at $27.06, and finally Class T shares also at $27.06. These last few classes are valued identically and are at the higher end of the spectrum we're seeing here. The filing also makes a note that as of the 31st of August 2025, there were no Class D shares, Class S shares, Class J1 shares, and Class J2 shares outstanding. This means these share classes were not actively being traded or held by investors at that particular time. Now, while the document tells us the numbers, it is important to understand what they represent. This transactional net asset value is a key piece of information for investors in EQT Private Equity Company LLC because it directly influences the price they pay when buying into the fund and the price they get when selling their shares. It is based on the underlying assets and liabilities of the company, giving a snapshot of its market value at a specific point in time. This kind of reporting is crucial for transparency and for investors to track the performance of their investment. The filing also mentions that this information is available on the company's website, but importantly, they clarify that the content of the website is not considered part of this official report. So while the website might offer more details or context for regulatory purposes, only what is in this filing counts. The report does point investors towards Exhibit 99.1 for additional information. This usually means there is a more detailed breakdown of the net asset value calculations or other related financial data that gives a deeper dive into how these values were reached. Exhibit 99.1 is the actual net asset value as of the 31st of August 2025. This is where the detailed mathematics behind those per share values is likely found. For serious investors, this exhibit would be the place to scrutinize the holdings and liabilities that contribute to the overall net asset value. Looking at the structure of these share classes and their net asset values, it suggests different investment tiers or perhaps shares with different fee structures or rights. The small differences in net asset value per S share, like between Class I and Class A, I might seem minor, but they can add up over time, especially with larger investments. It is worth noting that EQT Private Equity Company LLC is identified as an emerging growth company. This status in the US allows them certain flexibilities in reporting and compliance, which can be advantageous for newer or smaller public companies as they grow. They also noted they are not using the extended transition period for complying with new or revised financial accounting standards, which means they are adopting these standards as they are released, suggesting a commitment to current accounting practices. Now, let S put this all into perspective. The net asset value per S share essentially tells us the value of the company's investments and assets minus its liabilities, divided by the number of shares outstanding. In this case, for EQT Private Equity Company LLC, on the 31st of August of 2025, you could buy or sell shares at prices ranging from about $25.72 to $27.06, depending on the specific share class. While the document does indeed provide comparative data from previous periods within this specific section, understanding these values is key for investors who are likely tracking how these net asset values change month over month or quarter over quarter. A rising net asset value per S share generally indicates that the company's underlying investments are performing well, increasing its overall worth. Conversely, a declining net asset value would signal that the company's assets are decreasing in value or its liabilities are increasing. In terms of what this tells us about EQT Private Equity Company LLC's direction, this filing is a very specific snapshot focusing solely on the net asset value calculation. It doesn't give us the full picture of their investment strategy, their portfolio performance, or their overall financial health, which you typically find in a more comprehensive report like a 10K or a quarterly 10Q. However, for investors in this specific private equity fund, knowing these net asset values is crucial for their investment decisions. The valuation itself, $26 to $27 per S-hair, suggests a certain scale and maturity for the fund's assets as of that date. For our analysis, the key takeaway is the precise valuation of these different share classes. The fact that they are so close suggests a fairly uniform valuation methodology applied across potentially similar underlying investment pools. The slight variation, for example, between Class E, Q, H, and T shares all at $27.06 might be due to very minor differences in accrued expenses or specific share class features. The Class A S shares at $25.72 are the outlier, being notably lower. This could indicate a different investment strategy, perhaps a newer vintage fund, or a class with higher associated fees, or a different liquidity profile. Without prior period data, it is hard to call it a trend, but the consistency across most classes is a good sign of a well-defined valuation process. The lack of certain share classes being outstanding, like Class D and S, simply means those specific series of shares are not currently active within the fund. Now, to offer a little opinion, EQT Private Equity Company LLC, as a private equity firm, aims to grow the value of its investments. This report gives us a factual basis for that value at a specific point in time. The consistency in valuations across many share classes is positive, suggesting operational stability in how they manage their fund accounting. However, the absence of information on growth or changes in these values makes it a limited view. For investors, the next step would be to look at the monthly or quarterly preceding reports to see the trajectory of these net asset values and to understand the underlying reasons for any movements. The external context here is that private equity funds are generally long-term investments, and their value can fluctuate based on market conditions and the success of their portfolio companies. In conclusion, this filing is a precise reporting of net asset value per S-hair for EQT Private Equity Company LLC as of late August 2025. It's essential data for their shareholders, providing the current price for buying and selling shares. While it is a limited piece of the puzzle, it offers transparency on a critical valuation metric for this private equity entity. Alright, that is our breakdown of EQT Private Equity Company LLC's latest filing. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description to connect with fellow finance enthusiasts. Thanks for watching. See you next time.